you guys could go ahead and take this second to go ahead and download the Marine Debris Tracker app on your phone. It's available both on iPhone and Android, and that'll give you kind of the ability to follow along while we go through this here. And then also set up a quick poll to just get us started this morning to learn about your experiences doing cleanups. If you participated in one before, you can just take a second to use that QR code or that link that I posted in the chat box to answer that quick question. We'll go and see if there's been anything on that so far. Children's bike, that is funny. I'll add in my few things. I found a toy tiger one time. He was like perfectly posed standing up. All right, well, feel free to fill that in while I go through this presentation, and we can take a look back at that at the end here. But I'm going to go ahead and get started talking about Debris Tracker. So here we go. All right, so to give you a little bit of background, so Debris Tracker is an app that was developed at the University of Georgia in collaboration with the NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. And so I work under Dr. Jenna Jambeck there, who's the director of the Center for Circular Materials Management at the New Materials Institute. And I am a research engineer as well as a citizen science director for Marine Debris Tracker. So this is very much my baby, so I'm excited to be talking about it with you here today. So what we're going to do is just run through a quick training of how to use the app, and I'll also give you some case studies of how we used it in our research, and then I'm going to try to leave quite a bit of time for questions. If you have specifics about how you could apply the app or how to use it, I'm happy to answer any of those. So a little bit of background on me. So I am an environmental engineer by training. So our research is all about upstream solutions to plastic pollution. So I've had the opportunity to study waste management systems all around the world, and study how they're failing and how they're succeeding in keeping plastics out of the ocean. And my passion has really always been the people that are affected by this issue. And so recently in India, I had the opportunity to do a lot of work with the informal sector, studying their contribution kind of on the front lines of keeping plastic pollution out of the ocean. So not what I'm going to talk about today, but if anybody has any interest, would love to connect over that. It's really a passion of mine, and enjoy getting to do that work. So Debris Tracker, as I mentioned, is a free open access tool. So we've really created this to function as a tool for people to use. So it really, is very open-ended in the ways you can use it and apply it, and also we've tried to make it flexible and functional in terms of being useful both for scientific organizations, educators, nonprofits. We've really tried to work very hard to make it a very flexible platform. So the app itself records geospatial points of litter. So it's very detailed, very specific data, a very specific litter item, what material category that is, and then where in the world that's found. And then all of that data goes to an open data platform, and so that's hosted on our website here through the University of Georgia, and all of that is freely and publicly accessible to anybody to use. So people have used that data from anything from scientific research all the way to public policy and advocacy and education. So we kind of have a twofold mission, one in being a tool that's functional both scientifically and from a citizen science perspective, and then hosting that open data platform of beach cleanup data, but also data from litter pickups in cities all around the world. And this will kind of be a quick overview today. I'm not going to get too terribly in depth just for sake of time, but we do have quite a few resources on our website, including a more extensive tutorial that'll kind of go through what can go wrong and how to fix it, and then also a PDF guide as well. So that's available in both formats. If you do have further questions, you can of course reach out to me, but these resources are also available. I won't play that right now just to save time, but So I'm going to go ahead and just run through quickly how to use the app and how it actually works, just so you have some idea when we talk through these case studies, and also hopefully that'll get you started on using it as well. So hopefully you've already downloaded the app, but if not, not too late. If you want to go ahead and get that downloaded, that'll be easier for you to walk through and go ahead and know what's going on. The app's available both on iOS and Android, so should be accessible to most of you. And so once you open the app, on the front page, there's a start tracking button that you can click, and that will take you into a section of lists that you can select from. We host lists for a variety of organizations all around the world, everything from kind of, as I said, researchers to nonprofits, to specific projects. And that's one of the beauties of the app, is that it's very customizable. So all of these lists have, different litter items they're looking for based on the litter personality of the area that they're tracking in. However, we on the back end kind of match all of those items in that list to a list of master items that we've developed through trial and error, basically, of having all these different lists in the app. So from a research side, that's really exciting in that all of these lists can provide the data specificity that organizations and researchers need to cater to the different areas they're looking at. But we can also provide that cohesion of being able to talk together on the back end, of being able for researchers to use data from different lists from all around the world, from different organizations, and have that match up and talk to each other. Once you click the start tracking button and select a list, you can open it up, and you can read more info about the list. If you click the info button, it'll kind of give you some background on who the list was created for, why it's used. The NOAA list is always a good place to start with. They have a pretty widely accepted shoreline protocol, and that's what this list is based off of. We have a different list that we use for our research because it's more geared. We do a lot of work collecting litter samples, but more in cities, so more walking around in a community. So it's a little bit different than what you'd necessarily find on a beach. I see a question here on how do we decide which organization to choose, so I'll just address that a little bit more in depth. You can track on any list. It's really what meets your needs, and we can also create customized lists. So for any of you who are really interested in using the app and looking to get more involved, we can create customized lists if there's not a list that already meets your data needs. I think we created a while ago, I think there is a sustainable seas trust list in here, so that is definitely an option for you guys to use. Okay, so once you open up your list and select it, the little turtle icon in the center will help you create a profile. So you can create a username and password. You can also connect through SciStarter. If you guys are familiar with that, it's a big citizen science platform that has a bunch of different projects on it, and this is one of them. So you can link through SciStarter if you have an account with them, and you can also connect through Facebook. And so to actually track items and kind of scroll through the app, you click on those yellow categories at the top, and you can skip down to the category. And then that little up arrow in the bottom right hand corner will take you back to the top. So we've tried to design it to make it as few clicks as possible needed to log an item, which is why the counters are all set to 1 already. So you can just click add, and you'll see it get added to your trash can. You also feel your phone buzz. It's just a little bit of physical feedback that you hit the right thing. And so one other thing that we've added is you'll see a star in the top left-hand corner of each item. So you can also create a customized favorites list, which we've found to be really, really helpful, because I'm sure you guys have noticed if you've done any beach clean or litter transect work that, every area really has its own kind of customized litter personality. And so that will allow you to tag items that you're seeing regularly and aggregate them in one spot in that favorite section at the bottom, so that they're easily accessible. I found it makes it a lot faster to be able to track really quickly and efficiently. And that customization is also really important because the top items are different everywhere. Under that star on the left hand side on the bottom, you can click the little eye icon. If the organization that created the list has provided more info about that particular item, it'll be listed there. And you can also add a description there. So when you go to download this data, that will show up in the CSV file. So we've used it for everything from, describing colors of an item. If you have to log in an other describing what that other is, people have also used it for collecting brand data. That's kind of an open-ended field that you can customize and create what you want in that field. Other relevant buttons to know about: the X button will end your session, so don't click that if you have data that you want to save. But if you're playing around with the app right now, that's a great thing to click at the end of this session. The little question mark will take you to our video tutorial online. The camera button will log a photo, and so those photos are not directly associated with debris items. They're just logged along your geo path of the litter items you've logged. That photo will be logged along there as well. And so we recommend, because photos are really large and because they can take a lot of data and it can be difficult to get them to upload correctly to the database. It just can take some time. You have to have a really good Wi-Fi connection. So what we recommend typically is kind of taking a photo at the end or taking a photo at the beginning of where you're tracking, kind of limiting yourself to a couple photos. We're working on, we know that, image recognition and litter is certainly something that everyone is really excited about right now. And so we're kind of, looking down the line into some other way we can better incorporate that. But, litter also has the difficulty of there being so much of it, and, every item looks different. It's difficult to identify the background that the litter is sitting on, and difficult to be able to submit enough photos to really capture that variety. So for right now, we recommend that you limit yourself to a couple photos, although we also typically take a bunch of photos outside of the app. This is then you have kind of a supplementary data set. So that's also an option. The little play pause button at the bottom is tracking locational data. So one of the feedback we've gotten from the citizen science community, and specifically from the community of researchers who's trying to analyze citizen science data, is that you need to know not just where the litter is, but where the litter is not. And so that play pause button, when you're using the app, is tracking a background line of where you're walking, basically, so that we can see where the litter points show up along that. And then that little gear button allows for some customization. So you can set a minimum GPS accuracy. So that just means, if you want the GPS accuracy to be better than, say, 10 meters, that's kind of a good research line that we've typically used. You can set it for 10, and you'll get an error message when you try to log something and your phone isn't sure where you are within 10 meters. To fix that error, we've typically found that if you go to your Maps app and open it up and refresh your location on your Maps app, your phone will have a better idea of where in the world you are, and then you'll be able to increase your GPS accuracy there. You can also change the settings from imperial to miles based on whatever you're used to, and then you can turn on and off that vibrate on log feature that buzzes your phone when you add an item to the trash can. We found that's just useful for when you're tracking in a really distracting setting like a beach or the side of the road. It's nice to have that physical feedback of I've hit the right button and it's being loaded. In addition, when you're actually logging the items on the numbers, you can use those up and down arrows to change the numbers, and you can also click in the numbers to directly type in, which is nice if you have say 50 of something. You don't have to sit there and click up until you get to 50. I see a question popping up here about how do you solve the legal issue of tracking users. So this app is tracking location. So you do have to allow the app to track the location, and then it's all in our terms of service, sort of spelled out very specifically, what this is doing, what this will be used for. And then we also have a time delay on how long it is after you submit the data before it shows up in our database to protect people's location privacy. But I think, generally, most people who use the app are pretty aware that it is tracking your location. That's sort of the whole premise. So that is very clear, and we make sure that is very clear to people who are using the app. Okay, so once you've tracked an item, and if you guys want to, if you're following along here and you want to log a test item, that'll kind of let you go through the steps here. You can log a test item, and then you can head over to, you can click that top arrow by the trash can up there, and it will move you over to the submission page. So one thing that is really cool about Marine Debris Tracker is that you can use the app even if you're offline. So, as long as your phone has GPS service, which typically that's pretty widespread. We've had people use this in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So typically that's pretty widely accessible. Your phone will normally know where in the world you are, even if you don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet. But so once you click over, you will see a little map that has all the items that you've logged, and you can edit and review those items there, and you can get rid of any items that you didn't need to submit. And then once you're happy with what your data looks like, you can also, another note, we don't necessarily encourage this because this kind of path logging background track is something that we're trying to develop and that I do think is really useful from a research perspective. But if you have volunteers that are uncomfortable with that background path logging, you can also delete that path log here in this map. And in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little delete path, and so you can get rid of that if you're not comfortable submitting that background track. So once you click submit, you have options. One of them is to email a CSV file, which you can email that CSV file to yourself if you're worried for some reason about the data not uploading to our database correctly, which shouldn't happen. But for some people who have really bad internet access, it might be less data to email CSV than to submit to our database. And then you can also click at the very top, save session, which will save that whole session to your phone, and you can't lose it even if the app crashes. It's saved as part of your phone. Obviously, you can't delete the app, but that will save it so you can submit it later when you do have internet access. And then that submit button will take you all the way to our database to upload everything, and you'll get a little thank you for tracking message. You can also share it on social media, which we highly recommend. If you click that, there's a session survey button, and not all lists have a session survey, but some of them do. So that's kind of a pretty new feature that we've added, where we're allowing lists to collect other information in a either multiple choice or fill in the blank format, where it's people are asking questions like, what was the weather like when you were tracking, what's the land use of the surrounding area, volunteer, some projects have like a volunteer number or volunteer name, those kind of things. So for any of you who are interested in creating a list for any of your projects, that's something that we can offer, that capability of collecting that data as well. So you guys have kind of already seen what happens on this side of things, but I'll show you what happens on the data side. So we're actually in the process of redoing our database and our website at the moment, which I think will be really exciting and offer a lot of new capabilities for data analysis and data visualization. But for right now, this is what it looks like, and it's still pretty cool to get to see all of the data. So yeah, this map is, again, open and available. If you would like to go explore it, feel free to. And if you would like to download the data, that's also very accessible. We have countries all around the world that are tracking. I will say that, a lot of our citizen science users who are tracking, regularly, consistently, it does tend to be fairly US centric. But we're actively trying to expand that. So we have lists. We also have the capability of offering lists in other languages. So I think we're over 10 different languages now that we have lists in. So I think that is another way we're trying to expand our reach and expand the audience we're able to access. So yeah, so here's some of the lists that we have in different places around the world. So we do have a pretty broad range of people tracking at the moment, which is exciting. I've just added this unclassify list down in Argentina in Spanish, which is cool. As part of our Nat Geo expedition that we did last year, we added lists in Hindi and Bengali, which I think are maybe some of the more less accessible languages that don't normally have these kind of tools available. So that was neat. We also have a list in Arabic with a Jordanian Ministry of Conservation. We have lists in the US, and then we have X Expedition, an all-female sailing trip that's sailing around the world this year. So they're using the marine debris tracker on all of their ports. We have EcoBlitz, which is an initiative developed by Nat Geo educators out in California, that they're using the app along with iNaturalist, another citizen science app, to record different species that they find. So they're recording different species along with what trash they find in an area. So they've had that's a really fun project for getting kids outside and getting them to look at, what's the diversity of an area, and then, what kind of trash are you seeing, and talk about how those things are related. So that's been a fun project to get to follow along with and support. And so then, besides all of those other projects that, are organizations that we work with, that we host their list on the app, we've also used the app a lot for our own research. And so for that, there's two types of data, and both are really valuable. And so one of them that we collect on the app that is a lot of, the data that organizations and citizen scientists collect is very opportunistic. So it's people collecting data wherever they find it. It's people collecting litter data, just in their community while they're walking on the street or walking along the beach. So we do have a lot of people who track like that. And that data is still really valuable. If you have enough opportunistic data from our end, we can use that to, draw scientific conclusions. But for our research, we typically do it in a little bit more regimented fashion, where we're using transects. So this is from our first pilot project of our circularity assessment protocol, which is I think Jenna will be talking a little bit more about that later on in a webinar later this week or next week. But so the basic idea of the circularity assessment protocol is that we're trying to get a holistic view of how plastic is used in a community. And one of the things that we look at, of course, is leakage. And so as part of that, we track litter that's actually on the ground, and then we can analyze that by density. So this map in particular, the one you're looking at in the middle, you're seeing litter and litter densities by the colors, and then you're also stores and restaurants, and those green boxes and purple dots. And so you can we're trying to figure out if there's a correlation between those kind of physical things in the environment and the litter we're seeing on the ground. So to do this, we pick randomized transects, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let me answer that question first, which is, do you use a model to track where the trash comes from? So again, this is really a tool and a platform for researchers, for educators, for anyone really who wants to use it. And so we have not yet done a macro analysis on all of the marine debris tracker data, just because we haven't gotten to the point where we have enough data to say anything about opportunistic data. But at a small level, yes, we have used debris tracker for projects that model where trash comes from. And so we actually had a master's student a couple years back who did her master's research creating a geospatial model of an island off the coast of Georgia. It was actually, let me see if I can go back really quickly. It was actually the map I showed you earlier, where we zoomed into that little island off the coast of Georgia. So there we have a really big citizen science community. It's where the Georgia Sea Turtle Center, which is close to us in our backyard, is, and they have really encouraged a lot of just local people who live on it's like a very small a small, like kind of undeveloped island, and so they've encouraged local people who live on the island go for walks on the beach in the morning to collect data. And so we have, you know, this years of historic data, just random data, citizen science data. They're not using any necessarily sampling protocol to collect this data. It's just opportunistic, but she was able to create a model based on, you know, where the data was showing up, what types of items were being recorded, and determine that most of the plastic showing up on this particular island was from the island. So it wasn't stuff that was washing up on the beaches, you know, it was stuff that people were leaving on the beach after picnics. So yes, there has been some work with using a model to figure out where that trash comes from. And I think long term, that's kind of our ultimate goal, is to be able to have enough data that, you know, we can use that opportunistic data in a more purposeful way. So going back to this case study, so in addition to looking at litter densities, we also obviously can really quickly break down kind of what the top litter items are, which I think, you know, again, every area really does have its own litter personality. Everywhere is so different, and what its top items are, and the behaviors that affect and that generate those items. So I think that data is really valuable especially for policy change, to be able to bring that back and say, hey, we looked at your community. This is not just a big general far off issue. This is in your backyard. Here are what the top items that we saw littered were. For example, in this community in particular, they had made a really big effort to move away from single-use plastic, like to-go containers, and only use compostables. But we still saw a lot of compostable plastic show up in the litter, and you know, obviously it was all PLA, so that acts the same as regular plastic in the environment. It doesn't break down, and so we were able to, you know, take that data back to the government and say, like, you know, this doesn't work without education. You know, you can't just change the item and not change the behavior behind the littering. There we go. Okay, so talking about how we select our transects, so I kind of showed you some of what that data looks like. But so for our projects, what we're doing is using, basically we're extracting out the top fifth of population dense area in a city. And we use a data set called LandScan, which is aggregated data that uses census data, it uses light data, and a bunch of other data sets to give an ambient population density. So it's a, you know, live real-time population density. The data set comes out every year, which is a lot better than census data. So we extract out the top fifth, and then we randomly select transects, 3 transects, 100-meter transects within that area. So that's kind of what our sampling maps look like. And then you can see our data over here. So we actually got back, well, relatively recently got back from using this method in the field in India and Bangladesh as part of the National Geographic Sea to Source expedition. So we tracked over 56,000 litter items on our pre-monsoon expedition, and then we went back again post-monsoon and tracked some more. So I think we're over 90,000 items in total. And so, you know, we're able to break down kind of the top items overall and the litter densities comparatively between cities. And then I'm going to see if this will work. So I'm actually kind of in the heart of analyzing the data right now. So I wanted to show you guys a live look at our pre-monsoon and post-monsoon data. So this is, you can see the Ganges River here, all the tributaries, the you know, population density map in the background, and then I'll zoom in and show you one of our sites real quick. Okay, so this is in Patna, India. You can see a very high population dense area. The blue, so we subsampled post-monsoon, so the blue is pre-monsoon sampling data along those transects, and then the green is what it looks like post-monsoon. So you can see, I mean, this is still very general. I'm still not done with this analysis yet, but generally there is a little bit less litter post-monsoon, which we think some of that ended up washing into the river. So still in the heart of that analysis, but there's a lot of interesting things we can draw from this kind of data. And so as another part of our work in India and Bangladesh, we also did a lot of community engagement with the app. So this is another way that this is a really exciting tool, you know, not just to collect data for research, but also as an educational tool. I mean, really at its core, that was what it was developed as, a way for researchers to show what it looks like to collect data in the field, what you can do with that data, what kind of analysis you can do with that data. So we ran both community workshops where we worked with local nonprofits, educators, engaged citizens to train them on how to use the app. And then we also did programs in schools where we collected, had them go out and collect data on paper data cards, but then kind of walk through the logic and the process of analyzing data the way that scientists do, asking, you know, the questions of, you know, what's there, why is it there, and where does that come from? And so that was a really fun experience. We actually developed some educational curriculum out of that with National Geographic education, and so that should be publicly available very soon, which is something I can definitely follow up and share with you guys if anyone is interested. So that's all I got for you today, but I'm hoping that you guys might have some questions or things you want to engage on. So if you do have further questions after we're done with this webinar here, feel free to reach out. Our debris tracker email is listed there. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and we'd love for you to connect with us on those platforms. And my contact info is also listed at the bottom, so feel free to reach out to me directly as well.
All right, thanks, Kathryn. I see we have a question so far from Christina. Do you use any model to track where the trash comes from?
Yeah, I kind of talked about that a little bit already with the Jackal Island project. So, you know, just expanding on it a little more, I think definitely that's the ultimate goal. And, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity because of the way this app collects really geo-specific data, that we can use this to really be able to model where trash is coming from and where it's going in a community. So we're looking at how to compare this to like rainfall data and you know, topographic data, to kind of get, you know, a scouring velocity of how much, you know, rain might be moving litter into rivers. So there's definitely a lot of ways to model where the trash comes from and also where it's going. And so I think, you know, that really specific geo-specific litter data is really helpful for that, even more so than, you know, collecting data from a beach and having kind of that aggregated point of here's the data. Instead, we have a very, you know, dispersed map of where litter is across a surface, which I think is really helpful for that kind of modeling effort. I see another one. Can custom new items be added to an existing list? So that depends on the list. Yes, we can continue to adapt and customize lists, and that's something we do as people, you know, get out there and use their list and find things that they want to add that they have issues with. But the one thing I have to clear that with the organization that's using the list. Yeah, it would just depend on which list wanted to, you know, be adapted, and if the people who own that list, if the organization wants to change that list. So we have had, you know, kind of issues where people who are actually out there tracking say, hey, we need this in the list, and the organization is like, no, it's fine. But thankfully we do have the option of logging other and describing what it is, so that does kind of get rid of, allow for some more flexibility there. But yeah, so we can customize new items as long as the organization that is using the list is okay with that. A lot of times they're using both Marine Debris Tracker and their traditional paper data cards, and we want to make sure that those match up as much as possible. Ooh, that's a good question. So we've got, what is missing in the app so far from your point of view? I do think that, you know, having more ability to take images and to explore the image recognition side of debris is really going to be something that's important in the future, and it's something we're kind of actively working on figuring out the best way to incorporate that. Again, with photos are even more kind of legal ramifications for creating a photo sharing platform than a location sharing platform. So we're still trying to navigate those waters and figure out what that looks like exactly for us. We've also gotten feedback from people like educators who really like that this forces you to really look at what is in the litter instead of just taking photos. But yeah, I do think that's a direction we'll be going in the future. We're also, one other thing that I'm hoping to incorporate going down the line is a little bit more of a gamification element. Again, we're kind of always straddling that line of wanting to encourage regular people, regular citizen scientists to just get out and use the app, but also providing a scientifically rigorous tool for our own research and for other people's research. So that's a little bit of a navigation effort there, but we do want to add like a friends feature where you can see how much you're tracking in comparison to your friends. Be able to really quickly access your stats of how much litter you've tracked over your lifetime membership of the app, kind of see where you've done cleanup efforts, those kind of features that just give people that additional motivation of seeing how much you've tracked. And you can find all that by downloading it on our website and analyzing the CSV file, but that's not super accessible to a lot of citizen scientists. So
okay, we have another question from Jakob saying, I think that it's an issue that a lot of scientists think citizen science data is not good enough to compare to data gathered by the scientists themselves. Have you tried to do some comparisons or done research on this if possible to assess the difference in data quality?
Yeah, so as part of our work in India, we actually compared a few different methods of collecting litter data, including using marine debris tracker, using drones, and then image algorithm recognition. And then we also used quadrats on the ground, just collecting as we walked along a transect, collecting, taking photos every 10 meters. So we should have more, one day that paper will come out at some point and we'll have more of a comparison of those different methods. But I will say that I think we've really tried very hard to make the app as user-friendly as possible. And because it's collecting data in real time, because it's I mean, you're literally just pressing a button of what you see. It's also very difficult to mess up. And so, we definitely provide additional training to our users that, we are using for more of a research project, which I definitely would recommend. But I do think that that opportunistic data is still really valuable data if we get enough of it that we can kind of statistically account for those potential error. We're also working on, as part of our continuing to grow and adapt, one other thing that we're working on adding is kind of a verified user category that would, say this person has been trained on the app, which I think would add another layer of security to scientists who are looking to just use this, any data from the database. That would help to kind of verify that those people were trained on the app and know what they're doing and are not going to mess anything up. So
and part two of Jakob's question was, would you say that there's a lower age limit, for example, school children for using the application successfully?
So for our context, we've really found that kind of middle school, upper elementary is kind of the cutoff of as low as we would go in terms of age. I think the really exciting part of this is not just collecting the data. I think that is really something that anybody could do, but having some basic math and graphing abilities to be able to analyze the data, I think is another level of education, both in terms of scientifically, but also in how we look at litter and what the importance of the data is. And so we've done it two ways as well. So we've had kids go out with paper data cards and then come back to their teacher and have their teacher log in the app. So that's one way to do it. And then we've also had, kids on tablets actually collecting the data. So that really just depends on context there in terms of what kids are used to and how comfortable they are with that kind of smartphone technology.
We have another question from Ibrahim saying, can people around the world use the same app?
Yes, so anybody can use the app. wherever you are in the world. And as I mentioned, we've created a lot of ways to track data, even if you don't have Wi-Fi. So we've had people tracking in really incredibly remote places across the Atlantic Ocean, in the Arctic, and we did a bunch of tracking in the Himalayas when we were in India. So there's definitely, we've had people all over collect data, which is really, really exciting to see. We do generally have different lists for different parts of the world because of that, the differences in litter in different parts of the world. But that's also not really necessary. It's just something we've created to make it easier for people to track. But for example, the NOAA list, which is kind of our main default list, has items all around the world tracked on it.
Thanks, Kathryn. I also have a question. Would you be able to expand on any of the trends that you see in the data, like in different regions where people log the data, or in different times of the year? So for example, here in our first period in South Africa, there's often a lot more litter at the beaches, especially over New Year's, or at times of monsoons in India. Are there any kind of trends there that have come out?
So that's a difficult question just because of the spread of data that we have and also how inconsistent it is. So we do have, some researchers who are going back and using the app to track the same location time, like over time. And that is really, I think, the gold standard of data. And that's actually what we were trying to train people to do in India with our community engagement efforts, was to try to get people to go back and track the same transects we collected. We've had minor success in getting people to actually commit to that, because it's a lot of work, especially in India where the litter on the ground is pretty high. So yeah, you really need that data over time to be able to say that. Generally for us, it's kind of difficult to compare just because of we're getting more litter tracked now generally overall, but we've also made a lot of efforts to improve and expand and educate more people about the app. But I do think as we get more data in, as we get more researchers and citizen scientists participating in this and sharing their data and being willing to contribute to an open data platform and doing analysis independent of us in that open data platform, I think that we'll be able to see a lot more interesting data around the trends of plastic pollution. I can say for us, from our India project, we did get to do 2 different sampling events, one pre-monsoon and one post-monsoon, and I'm still working through that analysis, but we did generally see less litter post-monsoon. I think just because, again, the monsoons in India are pretty intense, and so you're seeing a lot of litter getting washed away during those kinds of events. Still a lot of litter on the ground, but again, it's a very difficult space to quantify because it's so active and so, tied to how people are using the space around them, how people are using materials. We're in the process of doing a project on a small island where we did a sampling event in February, and we'll go back and do one during the summer. When they're really kind of in their busy season of tourism. So I'm interested to see how that will change over time. Definitely lots of room to do more research in that space though.
Okay, thanks. There's another question from Gregor saying, did I get it correct that the app is primarily or even exclusively tracking debris in the marine environment, or does it take littering on land into account as well?
So we were born as marine debris tracker with our collaboration with the NOAA Marine Debris Program, but we've really made an effort to expand in recent years where we track. So, I think there's kind of an increasing recognition in the marine debris community even that all of this begins upstream. And so it's really important for us to be capturing litter data inland as well. And that's what most of our research in our research group is looking at litter in communities on the ground. So our work is pretty much exclusively focused upstream, but we also have citizen scientists that are working upstream. One of our top trackers is this guy in landlocked middle of the US, and he's tracked thousands of litter items in Omaha, Nebraska. So, I think there's a big need for that kind of data more inland. we haven't been able to change the name to just Debris Tracker just because of brand recognition issues. But I think that's kind of what we've also moved to just talking about it as Debris Tracker and kind of encouraging people to track more inland, especially on riverian systems, but really anywhere. All of this, there's nowhere on Earth that isn't attached to the water system in some way. So I really think, we're very open with collecting data anywhere.
Okay, I have another question. Is there any facility in the app that allows you to link the litter that you log to an event? So for example, like the International Coastal Cleanups, or kind of a scientific monitoring program like the Western Indian Ocean Countries Monitoring Program. Is there a way to attach it to a specific event, or will it just log it at a particular date and time?
So yes, we do. So like for the ICC, for example, we have an Ocean Conservancy list that is their paper data card in the app. So we kind of know that data logged in the app on that day is part of the ICC. But within that survey, the end of session survey I mentioned briefly, we can add a line for people to tag specifically, this was part of ABC event, whatever. Yeah, so we do have that capability of kind of tagging a session as part of a bigger sampling event, or part of a research project, or part of XYZ. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Kathryn. I don't see any more questions just yet. If anyone has any other questions, though, they're welcome to email either Kathryn or webinars@SST Africa, and we'll pass that along. If there are no other questions that I see, though, so I think we can end it there for now. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and a special thank you to Kathryn for presenting for us today. It was very interesting to hear all the work that the marine debris is recording and doing, and especially to see all the maps that you've been making, displaying all the data. Thanks so much, everyone.